Town of Salem 2 has been out for a bit over a month now, and while the game still isn't officially out yet, even though the public is playtesting it at this point in time, the point of this time period is to polish the game according to how the community feels. But how does a community feel? I went on reddit.com and decided to post that question to get an idea. At the end of this video, I will give my own hot takes on how I feel about the game. And before we begin, please like and subscribe and leave a comment below about what you think it needs to be discussed at this point in time about the feature of the game from the point of view of a fan to other fans. And please try to be respectful to all, even if you think they don't deserve that amount of respect. So let's get into the comments. The Brownski says, any daytime killing role is super OP in the right hands. I feel it's basically get rid of one confirmed evil. I don't know what you do to nerf it, but right now they feel broken AF. And to him, -545 responds, I think Deputy is the only real problem child of daytime killers. But even then, it's only when they're in the very capable hands, or the evils are being super dumb. Prosecutor isn't a problem, in my opinion, because their ability takes place instead of lynching, in addition to lynching. Conjurer isn't a problem in my opinion, because Coven is a minority in most games, so when they use their ability to take out maybe 12% of town, but when Deputy uses their ability they take out like 25% of Coven or 100% of specific neutral. Even then, I don't think Deputy needs a nerf right now. Another response to Brownski here is from Fruple. Had a game where a prosecutor got 3 townies, including themselves, killed by lynching someone with a lover. I think they're powerful, but the sheer stupidity of town makes it balanced. To that, Wildcard65 says, was this a game where the prosecutor hung the jailer who had an admirer? Fruple says, no, it wasn't. I can't believe this is a common occurrence. Lavendes responds to Fruple, I was possibly in this game as a pros-lynched jailer lol. Brownski responds to Fruple, of course, it's high risk, high reward, but a good player and I feel like evils have no chance. I think out of the non-killing roles, Seer is possibly best, but even a good Seer can't single-handedly win a game like the killing roles can. Which to that, Dark Knight 3909 responds, a good player with it still needs good info from town, and needs the info to be reliable, because otherwise you might shoot prosecute based on X fake info. Cross-dep outside of the 1-for-1, 1x1 needs others to be good in order to play well. Which to that Fruple responds, who would win? A skilled magician who can literally materialize a meteor out of thin air, or some lawyer who pointed their finger at them 2 seconds earlier? Dana Scar Meme says, buff Coroner or at least rework it. Nerf Seer. Maybe slightly nerf Conjurer, taking out a T-Pel for free during the day is a bit much. Yeah, I gotta agree with the last part. So Alice L responds to that. Just fake claim as T-Pel. I just claim as TK as jailer, mayor, prosecutor until mid-late game and never run into this issue as most conjurers just blast their load day 2. There is truth to that. Haddington the Chad replies, prematurely shooting conjurers makes a level of sense in that it's better to kill off than not. But yeah, it's best to wait till the later game when you can get off a more strategic kill. And Alizel responds, it is technically better to do so in all any where you can end up dying to a random berserker or werewolf if you hold on to your shot for too long, especially since most T-Pow rolls just randomly claim T-Pow day 2 for no reason at all. It's why T-Pow should just fake claim earlier on, as nobody's going to lynch you if you switch your claim from TKTSTP to Pros Jailer Mayor Monarch at your confirmable. And Enclave responds back, the only way you can nerf Deputy Contra is to give them basic attack instead. though only Monarch would survive then. And Rentabozo says, but then what's the point for Deputy? At least you're just a worse vigilante, which is kind of true. Smart Button 3221 says, I don't agree. A deputy can kill while talking to players, which is huge. A deputy might also act before some other roles who otherwise had a plan for that night. And then Clave responds, that's the problem. Deputy is too much like a day Vigi that it's hard to make the role unique. Their concept doesn't leave room for much balancing. They could balance around them, but I don't see that happening. Pure Regretto says, great name, it and most neutrals. Lavendash says, Conjurer is hilarious. So, Conjurer is hilarious. And RHMB13 says, it really is. It's basically part of the mayor revealing animation now, which is very true. I think like 50% of mayor reveals are followed by a conjurer just blasting. Last and Dumbfound says, Day 3, Player 1 has revealed as mayor. Immediately after, Player 1 has met an untimely death. And yes, that's very true. Rupal says, I think Seer needs to be nerfed so that they can't compare revealed townies to disconnected townies. It's stupidly easy to get some normal townie confirmed evil or good. Smart Button 3221 says, in my opinion, using Seer on a known player is overrated. You cover more ground by checking 2 unknowns. If you get 2 enemies on 2 random players, the weaker claim will be lynched. Seer is overpowered as long as they can force 1-for-1s. Undaedlius says, the weird thing is, they did make it so Seer can't compare to revealed mayors. They just didn't make the same thing for revealed prosecutors and deputies. It seems like an oversight that will be probably fixed in the future. Donelius says, definitely need a coroner and a admirer buff. Coroner is just boring, especially in the Medusa game, and admirer is a liability most of the time. Sufficient Offer 1989 says, buff coroner at least allowed to autopsy stoned people because you can't play that role in a Medusa game. Change deputy and conjurer. Just like the prosecutor, they shouldn't be able to instantly shoot before the voting phase has started. Nerf Seer. No counterplay. If you are evil except illusionist, you can 1-for-1 it at best, and then you are next to get lynched. Lavidas says, I prefer Invest in Town of Salem 1. Hopefully they upgrade it. Master Zealot's response to him, they specifically went out of their way to avoid old Invest because it dominated the game so much and restricted both claims and made changes roles a lot harder. Lavendas replies to him, I see. The new one is just so boring though. Master Zealot responds, basically, we're sheriff. RIP. Negative 545 then responds, Sheriff and Investigator combined make a single town investigative, which does mean that they separated both Sheriff and Invest are less than a whole investigative. Sheriff is less than 1 PI because they can only find enemies and non-book having covens, and Invest is less than 1 TI because they can only find NKs and book having coven. So together they can find all the evils. Master Zealot responds, that makes sense. Lost and Dumbfounded says, they went from one extreme to the other with Invest. Lavinas says, agreed. And Master Zealot then responds to that, and it makes new players confused and overwhelmed at times due to 1. Huge wills, 2. Not understanding why they are being lynched. The Red Void says, here needs a nerf. Make it so you can only compare people once. Admirer needs a buff or a rework. Coroner should see dead people's last result after an autopsy. It'll actually give some counterplay to jailers and taverns that visit serial killers. Shroud maybe needs a buff. To that Enclave 88 says, Shroud is fine in my opinion. They are the other SK-like role, but instead of bloodlust, they have shrouding. Enclave 88 says, nerf seer, they shouldn't be able to compare someone more than once. Buff coroner, I don't know how, but they need to be faster and more powerful. Buff baker, forcing 4 people to be alive and not being able to even kill every night is horrible, since you're probably gonna get lynched right after. They say famine needs to straight up kill people. And wildcard 65 says, famine is fine. Having a strong fake claim will do famine well as smartly breeding those who will likely be lynched late game. And as Enclave 88 says, the problem with that is the scenario of a strong claim versus confirmed claim. You will get lynched just to weed out potential people. You have to hope an evil you breaded doesn't get lynched, kind of like arso dousing. That negative 545 says, famine suffers without teammates honestly. The problem is that there is no good targets for bread. None. Bounties will confirm themselves by late game with minor exception, and evil will claim their actual role to not get hung in the final 4. So like, if you give bread to a townie, yeah, maybe, a coven, let's say Medusa, and a neutral, let's say Doomsayer, each one of those people is going to claim their role. TI will post their results and likely be confirmed. Medusa will claim Medusa, and while the town will want to hang them, they will have to get famine first. Doomsayer will claim Doomsayer and say that once the famine is hung, they'll die anyway. So as a famine, you have to start the game with a good fake claim that will fool the town into not lynching you. Then you have to fake claim a different evil so that you don't get hung in the final 4. It's way more difficult than any of the other and Apocalypse, in my opinion. Zorox 11 says, allow coroner to visit 2 different individuals at night. Shadowborn Phoenix says, buff another coven member to be able to have powerful attack, possibly Medusa. It sucks getting coven with no coven leader in all any, and just being able to do nothing against neutral killers or Apocalypse because they have basic defense. Now, I'm just going to put my personal opinion. There is Hexmaster. That's it. Blonde Koala says, I'm literally praying they do something with spy because I can't keep buying all these anti-spy scrolls, and the amount of people leaving when they get the role is ridiculous. Admirer also needs buffing. Give both lovers the ability to care for each other instead of just one, or so the admirer doesn't just die and take out the other townie. Pika Freak 108 says, spy got a big buff in the update like an update ago. Blonde Koala Things response, did it? Last I checked it was still pretty useless, but I haven't been on in a couple of days. I might have missed it. Negative 545 response, why bugs persist now assuming nothing happens? For example, if you bug one, then nothing happens in their house night 1, the bug stays there until something happens to them. So, if they get roadblock night 2, you get a message saying 1 was roadblock. If something happens to multiple bugs, it differentiates between bugs and their numbers. So if 1 gets roadblocked and 2 dies to werewolf, you'll see 2 messages saying 1 has been roadblocked and 2 was mauled by a werewolf. Kathy00 says, spy is pretty good though. Addicton the Chad responds, this is why it's wise to try and find the TP as admirer. Imploding Peach says, in my opinion, coroner should just become the current investigator and maybe name change. An investigator should go back to the old investigator of BGGFR so fighting. Pika Freak 108 says, how about no, with it linking to a video of how about no from Dr. Eva saying how about no. Old investigator was oppressive and extremely limited creativity. When it came to playing as evils, you always had to be in a specific fake lane because Invest had a nearly infallible instant detector. Weeaboo Void says, absolutely not. One of the things that made me prefer the sequel over the original is that I don't feel pressured to stay confined to a specific fake claim because of the single role. Code Every Damn Day says, I get doomed by Doomsayer the day after I shot a werewolf after keeping my role a secret until day 4 or 5. I don't think they should be able to guess revealed mayors, deputies, or prosecutors. I mean, they literally have the role next to their name. Ianie says, it's already difficult enough without being able to guess TIs. After like 2-3 days, there would be no more eligible people to guess. I would consider this change for Ritualist though. Vote Every Damn Day responds, it's not guessing though. I've been in games where Doomsayer won without needing Mayor Pross Deputy. It basically makes it impossible for Town to win if you all reveal and there's only Doom and Coven left. Also, I specifically said revealed, so they'd be able to guess Dep Pross Mayor, still just not after they've already used their ability. And Anye says, that's still a rare scenario. It's not guessing, I agree, but without the revealed roles, it is significantly more difficult and sometimes straight up impossible to win. Unless it's something we want that Doomsayer has a 0.0001% win rate. In my 150-hour playtime, I have seen maybe 3 to 4 Dooms win tops. The Retro Pioneer says they should buff the mayor and have 9 votes. I think that would be fair for the game's natural progression system. Anything the chat responds, and Knighted Mayor gets 17 votes. Lord Gerion says, honestly, I think Pross should actually be able to decide to guilty or enter their target. Addicting the chat responds, this makes sense by giving one last chance to defend themselves. But the thing I like about this game and Town of Salem 2 is it has less passivity and punishes passivity. I hate the idea of a passive prosecutor. Pure Regretto says, Pest needs unstoppable attack because it's worse war and man, Hexmaster, and Poisoner need to be able to toggle Necro on and off. Master Zealot responds, they should let Coven pass the book around by foregoing an action during the night. Except CL. Can't pass around till CL is dead. Pure Regretto responds to that. Yeah, cause your claim gets kaput if you are a confirmed townie. That Master Zealot says, I feel as if I just had a stroke and I have no idea what you're trying to say. Pure Regretto says to him, if you manage to confirm yourself as a Coven, you suddenly get Necro, you basically can't confirm yourself more if you use your ability to confirm yourself, which can basically kill you, especially if you claim TI. Master Zealot says, I've had that happen to me so many times. New Wildling, Hex, and Poisoner all feel super weak with Book. Poisoner to a lesser extent, but still. To that, Shapeshifter 13, a Blank Media Game staff, apparently, responds. Pest also rampages at their own house, and is roadblock immune. We have talked about some Pest changes to make it feel more unique though. Condensed Taco says, I think Trickster needs a buff. Right now, it's a worse vigilante. Kicker Freak 108 says, not necessarily. You get multiple tries to be right before you both die instead of being wrong once and taking out 2 townies. Quake 9 says, Conjurer probably shouldn't be able to kill revealed roles in my opinion. Dry Investment 3370 says, rework Coroner, nerf Seer, buff Vigi, and buff Pestilence. Make Werewolf Vet Ret unique. Add Vamps to all any. That negative 545 says, Werewolf Vet Ret have no reason to be unique. Double Werewolf will honestly likely kill each other because of powerful Rampage plus basic defense. Veteran is much weaker in Town of Salem 2 than it was in Town of Salem 1 due the much higher prevalence of astral attacks, so they have no reason to be limited. And Retri has had no reason to be unique since the rework in Town of Salem 1, where they went from resurrecting a townie to using their corpse to do their role. F Vamps in all any? No. That Dry Investment 3370 responds, Vamps deserve a place in all any. Big Scary Monster says, Admirer. It does nothing. Draw Danian says, Amnesiac should be the first true neutral role in the game and given its old abilities back from Town of Salem 1. That includes the reveal as well. To that code every damn day says, I agree. I don't get why it's limited to town. Negative 545 says, Coroner needs a major buff. I think Wildling needs to move up in the book priority as a way of nerfing it because Wildling does actually get weaker after it gets booked. Admirer needs a total rework. My proposed solution is GA who chooses the target. I think Arsonist is in a weird spot where it is either wildly up or wildly OP, depending on circumstance. I think some looking at Arsonist to change it, but not nerf it or buff it could be interesting. I think Neutral Apocalypse are all over the place. Death feels really good, especially after today's change to make them astral. I think Death Soul Collector is great. Baker is interesting. In a one-horseman game, it's pretty lackluster. So much to say that alone it's underpowered, but in a game with even one more teammate, especially a Soul Collector, then Baker really shines. I have no idea how to fix this. Baker is also one of the two roles that is hard countered by Spy. Berserker is, I think, the apocalypse that people enjoy the least, despite it being technically one of the more mechanically powerful ones. It pairs really well with Death and Famine, of course, but I think it could use some changes. Nerfs or buffs per se, but changes. Pestilence. Pestilence needs some changes. Of the apocalypse, I think it is mechanically the weakest and also one of the easiest ones to suss out. It suffers from being outed by Spy like Baker, however, to a much lesser degree than Baker, and honestly, can take longer to reveal than Baker sometimes, especially in veteran games, which is weird given that Baker effects are much stronger than Pestilence. Planker1223 says, Amnesiac needs a buff. Zilla Lizard says, I think the people saying that Admirer needs a buff are wrong. Admirer was nerfed because it was too powerful. It was a day animation that everyone saw, and if you rejected, you essentially died. What I think needs to happen is possibly slightly buff Coroner because at its current state, just a role that no one wants to play, as stated by the amount of people that leave day one as Coroner. Another thing that could happen would be to take away the Reading Whispers thing from the Wildling and give it to the Voodoo Master instead, because the Voodoo Master is the one dealing with the people speaking in the first place. So now we've reached the point of the video where I tell you how I feel about the roles. Truth is, most roles are pretty balanced and fun, but Seer, Coroner, and Potato roles definitely need a change. So let's start with the Seer. Seer needs a nerf, and that nerf I feel is limiting it to 3 uses. This gives room for evils to fake claim, and also you can't spam it all game. Next up is Coroner. Now, Coroner needs a heavy buff. I'm no role leaver, but I do feel like I play worse as Coroner because of the nature of the role. I feel the way to buff it is to let it have access to the real will no matter what. The way I feel it should work is if you autopsy someone, then the next day you should have access to the real will. That would definitely give the role the buff it needs. The rest of the roles do not need a buff at all, but I do feel bad for potato roles like Deputy. After you shoot, you're a potato all game. You're revealed and you're confirmed, but you're a potato. So I feel like giving them a night ability called Patrol would be perfect. Now what I call Patrol is to let someone visit and just see if they hear something or not. If something happened to the person they're visiting, then they hear something happen. If nothing happened, nothing happened. You would anyways know the next day. But that is sort of a TI-like aspect that I think a lot of roles could definitely use, because otherwise they're just potatoes. You're literally just a potato doing nothing, and that's my hot take. So before we end this video, I want to state I have no affiliate with Blank Media Games, nor do I speak with anyone who has any influence on how things run in the game or outside it. I'm just some dude who loves Town of Salem, who makes videos on his spare time about Town of Salem. If you have anything you would like to add, this is the time, write it in the comments below. I will be answering. And don't forget to like and subscribe.